So in this video, we're going to be looking more at the structure of the game's logic. So if we go ahead to where we did this kind of basic game loop, there's going to be a lot more logic to it when we actually come to it, but the main thing we want the game loop to do is update the game and then render the game. So in what form are we going to do this? Well, in this particular project that we're working on, I'm going to structure it in a way so that you guys can take it away and perhaps develop it to make your own custom game. So it doesn't have to be specific to this Flappy Bird clone. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to create two interfaces. One will be called Updatable and the other will be called Renderable. And what these two interfaces will allow us to do is create array lists of that interface type. And it will effectively be storing game objects in an array list, which we can then loop through in this loop and update each one and render each one. So let's go ahead in our package and create a new interface. One will be updatable, and we will delete the generated comments. And the other is going to be called renderable. So these two interfaces are going to be super simple. The updatable interface is going to simply have a method called update, and this will be a return type void. And it's going to take a parameter of input. And this input is a custom class that we're just about to create, but it's going to take that parameter there. And then for renderable, it's pretty similar. We're going to go ahead and have a method of type void, and we're just going to call it render. And this is going to take two parameters. One will be a built-in Java object called graphics2d, and that is from the package java.awt.graphics2d. And that's going to allow us to render to the canvas we created in this class. And then the second one is going to be a float variable called interpolation. And what this variable is going to do is, when we come to creating the game logic, the loop logic for our game, we're going to have a system where the game will update more times than it renders based on how fast the user's system is operating. And this variable here is going to make sure we can render game objects for the correct update that's currently happening. I'll go a bit more in depth about when we actually come to it, but for now just make sure the method is set up like so. So let's go ahead and create this input class. We'll go into our package, new class, and simply call it input. Again, we'll delete those generated comments. Okay, so now that we have this basic structure set up, we have a game object called updatable and a game object called renderable, and both of these have their own custom functions which will allow a game object to exist. We will fill out this input class later on, but for now let's come back to the game class, and let's go ahead and add some of the stuff that we need. The first thing we're going to need is an instance of this input class here, and we will initialize that somewhere below here. Let's just put a comment to remind ourselves, init input. And then once this is done, we're going to create two array lists. One of type updatable, and we'll call that updatables, and we can set this to a new array list right away. And the second will be called renderable, and it will take the type renderable. And these two array lists are basically going to act as storage for all of the updatable game objects we want and all of the renderable objects you want. As you know, with inheritance, anything that implements this updatable interface will be able to be added into this array list right here, and anything that implements the renderable interface will be able to be added inside here. So it means we can have all different classes for all different game objects, add them into these two, and then we're going to make custom methods that are going to handle them. And these two methods are going to be relatively simple. We're going to go ahead and create those now. We have private void update, and this is going to be called somewhere in our game loop once we come to the logic, but this is pretty simple. We simply say for updatable, call it u, in the array list updatables, we're simply going to say u.update, and then put in input. That's the global variable we made here, and actually just to remind ourselves, we will make sure we initialize this here. There we go, and we're going to be filling out the input class in a different video, but for now just make sure we have it initialized there. So this is the update method, very simple. We simply loop through every updatable we have and call its update method, and then we have the render method. private void render, and this is going to take that float that we did in the renderables interface called interpolation, and we'll come to what this variable does very soon when we start filling out the game loop. But for now, we can just use it to pass through to our renderable interface here. But we'll very quickly just say for renderable r in renderables, we simply call r.render, and then we'll need a graphics2D object and that interpolation variable. And in the next video, we'll be filling out the render logic here, and we'll learn how we can actually render stuff to the screen.